I am Crystal Morgan, 38 years old, and every Christmas I return to my childhood home in New Hampshire, despite knowing what awaits me. Years of being overlooked in favor of my brothers prepared me for anything, even the bombshell my father dropped at dinner. The entire extended family went silent when he announced, "Crystal, you will not be receiving any inheritance. Your brothers deserve it." I simply nodded and continued eating my turkey. Then, my 14-year-old nephew Aaron gasped at his phone. "Aunt Crystal is on the Forbes billionaire list." The room froze when they saw the number. "Where are you watching from today?" Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and stick around to see how my family reacted to discovering my secret success. Growing up in Hanover, New Hampshire meant pristine winters, manicured lawns, and a family reputation to uphold. Our white colonial home with its black shutters and circular driveway perfectly represented what my father, Richard Morgan, valued most: appearances. As one of the most respected neurosurgeons at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center, he expected his children to reflect his status in the community. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my brothers James and Thomas were destined for greatness in my father's eyes. James, 4 years older than me, inherited our father's analytical mind and steady hands. Thomas, just 2 years my senior, possessed natural charisma and business acumen. I was the unexpected third child, arriving after my mother Margaret had already packed away all the baby items. "Your brothers will carry on the Morgan legacy," my father would announce at dinner parties, his hand resting proudly on their shoulders, while I stood slightly apart, invisible despite standing right there. My mother would smile and nod her quiet acceptance of the family hierarchy, another wound that never quite healed. When James turned 16, he received a brand new Jeep Wrangler for his birthday. 2 years later, Thomas got a BMW. On my 16th birthday, I was handed the keys to my mother's old Volvo station wagon. "A practical car for a practical girl," my father had said, as if practicality was the best compliment he could muster for his only daughter. The pattern extended beyond material things. When James got accepted to Dartmouth, my father took the entire country club out to celebrate. Thomas got a similar treatment when he was accepted to Princeton. When my Stanford acceptance letter arrived with a full academic scholarship, my father glanced at it over his morning coffee and said, "California is very far away. Are you sure about this?" That night I heard my parents arguing. She could go to Dartmouth like James. "Why encourage her to move across the country?" my father said. "She earned that scholarship, Richard. It would be foolish not to take it," my mother replied, one of the rare occasions she challenged him. "Medicine and finance, those are real careers," he countered. "Whatever technology thing she wants to study is just a phase." Even my academic achievements were viewed differently. When my brothers brought home, as they were brilliant. When I brought home straight, as I was such a hard worker, as if my success came only through effort rather than ability. The message was clear. Their achievements came from innate talent. Mine came despite my limitations. In 8th grade, I built a rudimentary inventory management system for my father's private practice when his office manager complained about their outdated methods. I spent 3 weekends coding it, testing it, and making it user-friendly. When I presented it to him, he examined it for all of 2 minutes before saying, "This is nice, but we need a professional solution. Thomas is looking into some options through his economics class." Thomas had merely collected brochures from established companies. His research earned him praise at dinner that night. My working prototype was never mentioned again. During high school, I developed a knack for mathematics and computer science, winning the state programming competition 2 years running. At the ceremony senior year, my mother attended alone. "Your father and brothers send their regrets, but James has a lacrosse game and your father never misses those. Thomas is visiting Princeton this weekend." The trophy gathered dust on my shelf, while my brother's sports trophies lined the main hallway display case. Despite everything I maintained, excellent grades, captained the debate team, and built my first website for a local business at 17. The check for $2,000 I received was the first money I earned that made me feel truly valued. I framed it, but never cashed it. A reminder that somewhere, someone saw my worth. As Stanford Acceptance Day approached, my guidance counselor, Mrs. Bailey, pulled me aside. "Crystal, I know your heart is set on Stanford, but your father called me yesterday asking about Dartmouth again." "Did you tell him I am not applying there?" I asked, already knowing the answer. I did. He seemed quite upset. Let him be upset then, I replied, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. When the Stanford letter arrived offering a full ride, my decision was made. That night at dinner, I announced I would be heading to California in the fall. Computer science and business, my father frowned. Such an unusual combination. Are you sure you would not prefer pre-med James could help you prepare? I am sure, I replied, looking him directly in the eyes for perhaps the first time in my life. Something in my expression must have signaled this was not up for discussion. He nodded curtly and turned his attention to Thomas, who was debating between 2 summer internships at prestigious financial firms. The day I left for Stanford, my father shook my hand formally at the airport. Do your best, Crystal. If it does not work out, you can always come home and attend Dartmouth. As the plane took off, I pressed my forehead against the window, watching New Hampshire grow smaller beneath me. I felt something shifting inside. With each mile westward, determination hardened in my chest. I would succeed not to prove him wrong, but to prove myself right. Stanford University sprawled before me like a terracotta dream, palm trees swaying in the gentle California breeze. The campus felt worlds away from the rigid structure of my New Hampshire upbringing. For the first time in my life, I existed in a space where the Morgan name carried no weight, where I was judged solely on my own merits. While my brothers had their apartments fully furnished and their credit cards linked to my father's accounts, I moved into a small dorm room with only what I could fit in my suitcases. My roommate, a girl named Heather Davies from Seattle, watched me unpack my modest belongings. Is that all you brought? She asked, not unkindly. All I needed, I replied with a shrug. Heather would become my first real friend, someone who saw me clearly without the shadow of my brothers looming over me. She was studying electrical engineering and shared my passion for technology. You have a way of thinking about systems that I have never seen before, she told me one night as we worked through a particularly challenging programming assignment. You see connections that nobody else does. Her words warmed something inside me that had been cold for a very long time. To cover expenses beyond my scholarship, I worked 3 campus jobs simultaneously. Mornings at the campus, coffee shop afternoons at the computer lab, helping technologically challenged professors, and weekends at the library reference desk. Meanwhile, my social media feeds showed James enjoying his medical school experience and Thomas living it up at Princeton, neither working a day outside their studies. During freshman year Thanksgiving break, I stayed on campus, unable to afford the flight home. When I called to wish everyone a happy holiday, my father asked about my grades. 4.0, I answered truthfully. Well, that is good. Stanford must be easier than we thought, he replied, the backhanded compliment stinging despite the 3,000 miles between us. By sophomore year, I had begun developing my first startup idea, a customized software solution for small businesses. Using the skills I had honed building that inventory system years earlier, I created modular applications that could be tailored to specific industries. With Heather's encouragement, I entered the university's entrepreneurship competition, making it to the finals before losing to a graduate student's medical device prototype. My father's response, when I called to tell him about placing second, was predictable. Second place is just the first loser, Crystal. Perhaps you should focus more on your core studies. That summer, while my brothers interned at prestigious firms with connections facilitated by my father, I stayed in California, sleeping on a classmate's couch and building my small client base. By the time junior year began, I had 3 paying customers and was earning enough to cover my textbooks for the semester. It was in my advanced algorithm design class that I met Sophia Chen, a brilliant graduate student whose approach to problem-solving complemented mine perfectly. Where I saw the big picture, she noticed the crucial details. Where she perfected individual components, I envisioned how they could work together as a cohesive system. We should work together sometime, she suggested, after we were paired on a project and completed it in half the assigned time. That casual comment would ultimately change both our lives. Professor Winters, my programming instructor, pulled me aside after class one day. Morgan, that security protocol you designed for the last assignment shows real promise. Have you considered focusing your studies in that direction? I had not, but his words planted a seed. Data security was becoming increasingly crucial as more businesses moved online. There was a gap in the market for truly integrated adaptive security systems. When Christmas break arrived that year, I reluctantly flew home, having saved enough from my small business to afford the ticket. The contrast between my life in California and the Morgan family estate had never felt more stark. "Crystal looks thin," I overheard my mother telling my father on my first night home. "Do you think she is eating properly out there?" "She chose this path," my father replied dismissively. "She will have to manage the consequences." At dinner, James regaled everyone with stories from his surgical residency. Thomas discussed the hedge fund he was helping to launch. When attention reluctantly turned to me, I shared a simplified version of my small business success. "How cute," James commented. "Our little sister playing entrepreneur." My father nodded in agreement. "It is good practice for the real world, I suppose." I bit my tongue and changed the subject. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom surrounded by abandoned debate trophies and computer science awards, I made a decision. I would build something extraordinary, something undeniable. Not for their approval, but despite their dismissal. Back at Stanford for my senior year, I threw myself into research on data security protocols. Sophia joined me, our complementary skills, creating solutions that impressed even our most critical professors. Together, we developed the earliest prototype of what would eventually become SecureSphere, our revolutionary data security platform. Between classes and campus jobs, I began dating Michael Roberts, a business school student who initially encouraged my entrepreneurial dreams. For 6 months, things were wonderful. He listened to my ideas, offered marketing perspectives, and made me feel valued. Then came the night I shared my post-graduation plans to fully commit to building my security platform with Sophia. "Be realistic," Crystal Michael said, setting down his coffee cup with a decisive clink. "The tech security space is dominated by established players and experienced engineers, mostly men. You and Sophia are talented, but maybe start with something smaller. Get some experience at a big company first." His words echoed my father's lifelong doubts so perfectly that something inside me snapped. I ended our relationship that night. "You will regret this," he warned as I walked away. "Your idea will never get funded." Another voice telling me what I could not do. Another person underestimating what I was capable of. Another source of fuel for the fire growing inside me. The small apartment Sophia and I rented in Palo Alto became our headquarters living space, and sometimes sleeping quarters all in one. A folding table served as our desk, whiteboard, and dining table depending on the time of day. 2 secondhand laptops and an unreliable Wi-Fi connection were our tools. Determination was our most valuable asset. We graduated from Stanford with honors, but instead of attending the ceremony, we were pitching our security concept to a potential angel investor. He declined, but we barely noticed the rejection. It was merely the first of many. 2 young women with no industry experience, wanting to revolutionize cybersecurity. One investor actually laughed during our presentation. "Come back when you have worked at Google or Cisco for 5 years. Another scrutinized our business plan and asked, "Which one of you is the technical person and which handles the soft skills?" The question itself revealed his assumption that we could not both be technical experts. A third suggested we find a technical co-founder despite the fact that we had built a working prototype ourselves. When Sophia pointed this out, he smiled condescendingly. "Having a male CEO would make fundraising much easier for you girls." 27 straight rejections tested our resolve, but did not break it. We survived on instant ramen and determination coding until 3 in the morning, then waking at 7 to revise our pitch deck yet again. We need to change our approach, I realized, after particularly disheartening rejection, number 27. These investors do not care about our credentials or even our prototype. They cannot see past their preconceptions. Sophia nodded understanding immediately, so we make it impossible to ignore the product itself. We spent 2 weeks rebuilding our demo, creating a simulation that would allow investors to witness a real-time cyber attack and how our system would detect and neutralize it. Rather than telling them about our technology, we would show them. Investor 28 Anita Blackwell of Horizon Ventures watched our demonstration with narrowed eyes. When our system blocked the simulated attack using our proprietary algorithms, she leaned forward. Run it again, she instructed. Different attack vector this time. We did. Again our system prevailed. One more time, she said. Let me choose the parameters. After the third successful demonstration, she closed her laptop. 500,000 for 10%. We had been asking for 250,000 for 8%. Her offer valued our company higher than our own estimate. We accepted immediately. With funding secured, we moved out of our apartment into a small office space. We hired our first employee, then our second. We worked 18-hour days, often sleeping under our desks rather than wasting time commuting to our new apartment, which we rarely saw anyway. Our first major client came 6 months later, a regional bank that had suffered a data breach and was desperate for better security. Their systems were a mess, but our solution integrated seamlessly, creating protective layers without disrupting their operations. When their CTO called to tell us they had blocked an actual attack attempt using our platform, Sophia and I danced around the office, exhausted but elated. Word spread in financial circles. 3 more banks signed on. Then an insurance company. Then a healthcare provider concerned about patient data. Each successful implementation refined our product. Each new client expanded our credibility. Each day brought new challenges that we met with innovative solutions. My relationship with Michael had left an unexpected legacy. His doubt had taught me to be strategic about how we presented ourselves in the male-dominated tech security space. In pitches, we emphasized our Stanford credentials, our growing client list, and our proprietary technology, carefully managing the gender factor that seemed to trigger unconscious bias. Sometimes I would let investors assume Sophia was my assistant, until their technical questions forced them to recognize her expertise. Other times, I would intentionally downplay my own technical knowledge until a critical moment when demonstrating deeper understanding would shatter their assumptions. It is a game I hate playing, I confessed to Sophia late one night as we prepared for another investor meeting. We play it to win, she replied simply. Once we are successful enough, we can change the rules. Series of funding came after we secured our 10th major client. $8 million to scale our operations, hire specialized engineers, and expand our product offerings. The lead investor, Victoria Lane of Aurora Capital, was the first to see our vision without needing to be convinced of our capabilities as women. I do not care if you are women, men, or Martians, she said bluntly. Your retention rate is unheard of. No client has ever left your platform. That is all I need to know. For the next 3 years, I barely saw my apartment. Holidays were spent working. My personal life was non-existent. But SecureSphere was growing exponentially, our client list expanding from regional banks to multinational corporations, government agencies, and beyond. The toll was substantial. I developed migraines from sleep deprivation. Sophia caught pneumonia after working through a brutal flu. We both missed weddings, birthdays, and funerals. But neither of us considered stopping even for a moment. During this time, I maintained minimal contact with my family, occasional phone calls to my mother, brief emails updating them on my small business without revealing its true scale. Each time my father inquired about my career, I provided vague answers about doing well and making progress. Your brothers are thriving, he would inevitably inform me. James is being considered for chief of neurosurgery at 34. Thomas just made partner at his firm. That is wonderful, I would reply, saying nothing of our recent contract with 3 branches of the federal government or the acquisition offers we had rejected from tech giants. This deliberate obscurity was not about creating a dramatic reveal. It was about protecting myself from their dismissal, from having my accomplishments minimized or attributed to luck rather than capability. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to have my success casually diminished at the family dinner table. As SecureSphere approached its 5th anniversary, we had 217 employees' offices in 4 countries, an evaluation that would have seemed hallucinatory just a few years earlier. Yet, I still drove a modest car, lived in the same apartment I had moved into after our first funding round, and told my family I was still figuring things out. The truth would emerge soon enough, though not by my choice. The decision to keep SecureSphere largely separate from my personal identity happened organically. In the early days, it was a practical choice. As Sophia and I faced endless bias in pitching our company, we realized that letting the product speak for itself rather than putting our faces front and center was strategically sound. Even as success came, I maintained this separation. Our PR team handled media relations. Our growing executive team represented the company at industry events, and I focused on product development and strategy. When interviews were unavoidable, I kept them technical and brief, avoiding personal angles that might connect back to my family. For 5 years, SecureSphere grew exponentially, while I remained relatively anonymous within the industry. Our security platform became the gold standard, protecting sensitive data for 60% of Fortune 500 companies. Our proprietary algorithms could detect and neutralize threats that other systems could not even identify. What had begun as a Stanford project had transformed into a cybersecurity powerhouse. You realize you are one of the most successful entrepreneurs under 40 in the country, right? Heather asked during one of our rare dinner meetups. She had become our head of engineering after completing her PhD. The company is successful, I corrected her. I am just part of the team. She rolled her eyes. A team you built from nothing. A team that follows your vision. Stop downplaying it. But downplaying had become second nature, especially with my family. During my infrequent visits home, I presented myself as modestly successful, allowing them to maintain their perception of me as the underachieving Morgan. At Thanksgiving 3 years earlier, Thomas had cornered me near the dessert table. If you ever need career advice, little sister, my door is always open. Not everyone can be on the fast track like James and me, but there is no shame in that. I had nodded politely while calculating that my net worth had likely already surpassed his, even with his newly made partner status at his prestigious firm. James was equally condescending in his own way. Your little software business sounds cute, Crystal. Is it like making apps or something? My 12-year-old son Aaron is getting into coding now. Rather than explain that our security infrastructure was protecting nuclear facilities and financial systems handling trillions in daily transactions, I simply smiled. Something like that. My father remained the most dismissive. When are you going to get a real job with benefits, Crystal? Your mother worries about your retirement planning. The irony was almost painful. By that point, I could have purchased his entire medical practice with a fraction of my paper wealth, but I said nothing, absorbing his judgment, as I had for decades. The charade required effort but served a purpose. I did not want their sudden approval based on my financial success. I did not want to watch them pivot from dismissal to opportunistic pride. Most of all, I did not want to give them power over this part of my life, the part I had built entirely without their support or belief. When the Series C funding round valued SecureSphere at $6 billion, Sophia and I faced a decision. Taking the company public would mean significant wealth, but also public scrutiny. My carefully maintained privacy would likely end. Are you ready for that? Sophia asked as we considered the IPO option. Your family will find out everything. Maybe it is time, I said, surprising myself with the answer. I am tired of hiding my success like it is something shameful. The IPO preparations consumed another year of my life. Endless meetings with investment bankers, lawyers, and financial analysts. Due diligence that scrutinized every aspect of our business. Roadshows presenting to potential institutional investors. Through it all, I maintained radio silence with my family about the true nature of my work. My standard holiday visit was skipped that year, blamed on work commitments without elaboration. The night before our public offering, I sat alone in my office overlooking San Francisco Bay. The next day, my stake in SecureSphere would be worth approximately $4.8 billion on paper. The financial press had already begun running profiles on the secretive founder who had built one of the most valuable cybersecurity companies in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Will you be coming home for Christmas this year? Your father is expecting everyone. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, yes, I will be there. Perhaps it was time for the worlds I had kept separate to finally collide. The IPO exceeded all projections. SecureSphere stock rose 87% on the first day of trading. Financial news channels ran constant coverage, business publications rushed to publish profiles, and suddenly my Stanford graduation photo was appearing in articles titled "America's Newest Tech Billionaire." Despite explicit instructions to our PR team to maintain my privacy, the Forbes list was published 2 weeks before Christmas, featuring my full name, Crystal Ann Morgan, with an estimated net worth of $4.8 billion. The article highlighted my New Hampshire roots and Stanford education, though thankfully it contained few personal details beyond that. I did not know if my family had seen the list. Our communications remained superficial, focused on logistics for the upcoming holiday. Part of me hoped they remained oblivious, while another part finally felt ready for the truth. As Christmas approached, I made a reservation at a small hotel near my parents' home, rather than staying in my old bedroom as expected. I arranged for a rental car rather than having someone pick me up at the airport. Small acts of independence that would soon seem laughably insignificant. The night before departing for New Hampshire, I called Heather. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" she asked. "I could come with you for moral support." The offer was tempting. "No, but thank you. This is something I need to handle myself. But maybe keep your phone handy tomorrow evening." "Always," she promised. And Crystal, remember that their reaction says everything about them and nothing about you. With those words echoing in my mind, I boarded a flight to New Hampshire, unsure exactly what awaited me, but finally ready to face it. New Hampshire greeted me with a perfect winter tableau, the kind featured on holiday cards. Fresh snow blanketed the rolling landscape, transforming the familiar drive into something from a fairy tale. The Morgan family estate looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood. Imposing and immaculate, its colonial architecture speaking of old money and tradition. I parked my rental car, a modest Toyota sedan, at the end of the circular driveway beyond the luxury vehicles belonging to my brothers and their families. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the elegantly wrapped gifts from the trunk, modest items purchased weeks before the IPO had multiplied my wealth exponentially. The front door opened before I could reach for the bell, my mother appearing with a practiced smile. "Crystal, finally." Everyone else arrived hours ago. No mention of the year-long absence. No acknowledgement that I had flown across the country. Just the subtle reminder that I was, as always, falling short of expectations. "Hello, Mother," I replied, kissing her cheek. "The flight was delayed." It was not, but the excuse saved us both from acknowledging the real tensions. The house smelled of pine needles, cinnamon, and roasting turkey, the olfactory backdrop of every Morgan Christmas. Family photos lined the hallway documenting my brother's achievements over decades. My own graduation photo was tucked in a corner, barely visible behind a larger frame showcasing Thomas accepting an industry award. In the great room, the extended family had gathered around the massive stone fireplace. James and his wife Catherine sat on the leather sofa, their children Aaron and Emma playing with tablets nearby. Thomas and his wife Valerie occupied the love seat, their toddler daughter Lily napping against her father's shoulder. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the remaining spaces, creating a portrait of upper-class family contentment. My father stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, holding court as he always did. At 72, Richard Morgan remained imposing, his surgical precision evident in every controlled movement, his judgment present in every calculating glance. "The prodigal daughter returns," he announced as I entered, drawing all eyes to me. The comment was offered with a smile that did not reach his eyes, a perfect example of how criticism in our family was always wrapped in pleasantry. "Hello, everyone," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Merry Christmas." A chorus of greetings followed, ranging from genuinely affectionate from younger cousins to coolly polite from my brothers. I distributed gifts, accepted a glass of wine from my mother, and settled into the only remaining seat, a hardback chair, slightly removed from the main conversation area. "Crystal, you look well," Aunt Patricia offered. "How is your little business going?" Before I could answer, Thomas interjected. "Crystal is still finding her way, Aunt Patricia. Not everyone can have their career sorted by 30. The condescension was so familiar, it almost felt comfortable. I simply smiled and sipped my wine, letting him continue his narrative about my supposed professional struggles. Dinner was announced at 7, and we processed into the formal dining room with its gleaming mahogany table and crystal chandelier. Place cards positioned me between Cousin Robert and Aunt Patricia, safely distant from the center of the table where my parents and brothers held court. My father stood to carve the turkey, a Morgan tradition unchanged since my childhood. As he distributed perfectly sliced portions, he launched into his annual update on the family accomplishments. A momentous year for the Morgans, he began nodding toward James. Our eldest has been named Chief of Neurosurgery, following in my footsteps, but ascending to the position a full 5 years earlier than I did. Applause followed, glasses raised in James' direction. And Thomas, my father continued, has not only made partner but has brought in the firm's largest client to date, securing the Morgan name in financial circles for another generation. More applause, more raised glasses. Thomas accepted the praise with practiced humility. My father's gaze slid over me briefly before he continued discussing extended family achievements. Cousins entering prestigious universities. Uncles closing significant business deals. The Morgan success story continuing unabated across the family tree. As dessert was served, my father tapped his glass again, commanding attention. His expression had grown more serious, his posture more formal. I recognized the look from childhood medical ethics discussions at the dinner table when important principles were about to be conveyed. Family, he began, is the foundation of everything meaningful in life. The Morgan legacy has been built on careful stewardship of resources across generations. The room quieted, sensing the shift in tone. As Patricia and I advance in years, we have given considerable thought to the future, to ensuring that what we have built continues to strengthen the Morgan name for generations to come. My mother's eyes darted toward me briefly, then away. She knew what was coming. After consultation with our estate planners, we have made the decision to adjust our inheritance arrangements. James and Thomas have proven themselves to be responsible stewards of the Morgan legacy. Their children will carry our name forward with the same values and work ethic that have defined us. He paused, his gaze finally landing directly on me. Crystal has chosen a different path, one that has taken her far from family traditions and responsibilities. While we respect her choices, these choices naturally have consequences. The room had gone completely silent. Even the children seemed to sense the tension. Therefore, we have decided that the Morgan estate and primary financial assets will pass to James and Thomas, who have demonstrated their commitment to the values this family holds dear. He was saying in the most polite terms possible that I was being disinherited. Not that the inheritance itself mattered to me financially anymore, but the public rejection stung nonetheless. Crystal, he continued, his tone softening performatively, will, of course, always be a Morgan, but her brothers have earned the right to carry forward the family legacy. Every eye in the room turned to me, waiting for tears, protests, or pleading. Instead, I simply nodded, once speared a piece of apple pie with my fork, and continued eating as if he had merely commented on the weather. The silence stretched uncomfortably. My mother cleared her throat. The pie is particularly good this year. Do not you think I tried a new recipe? No one responded to her desperate attempt to change the subject. The weight of my father's announcement and my non-reaction created an almost unbearable tension. It was in this strained silence that 14-year-old Aaron James's son gasped audibly at whatever he was looking at on his phone under the table. His eyes widened as he looked up at me, then back at his screen. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking with adolescent excitement. "Aunt Crystal is on the Forbes list." James frowned at his son. "Aaron phones away at dinner, and do not interrupt with nonsense." "But Dad, look," Aaron insisted, turning his phone toward his father. "She is really on it. The billionaire list." James took the phone impatiently, clearly expecting to correct his son's mistake. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to shock as he scrolled through whatever he was seeing. "What is it?" Thomas demanded, reaching for the phone. As the device was passed around, the table expressions transformed one by one. Confusion, disbelief, recalculation. Finally, the phone reached my father. He stared at the screen, his face unreadable except for a slight twitch in his left eye. A tell I had noticed during childhood chess matches, when he realized he was about to lose. $4.8 billion, he read aloud, his voice uncharacteristically hollow. Crystal Ann Morgan, founder and CEO of SecureSphere Technologies. The room erupted into chaos. Questions overlapped. Expressions ranged from shock to sudden calculating interest. In the midst of the commotion, I continued eating my pie, savoring each bite with the calm of someone who had anticipated this moment for years. "Is this true?" My father's voice cut through the chaotic crosstalk, silencing the room again. His eyes, suddenly intense, fixed on me with a focus I had rarely received throughout my life. I set down my fork, deliberately dabbed my lips with my napkin, and took a sip of water before responding. The lifetime of being interrupted, overlooked, and dismissed had taught me the power of measured silence. "Yes," I replied simply. "Though the valuation fluctuates with the stock price, it was higher last week." Thomas laughed nervously. "This has to be a joke." "Crystal, the computer girl, a billionaire, come on." SecureSphere. James mused, his physician's memory recalling the name. "Wait, that is the security system our hospital implemented last year. The one that stopped the ransomware attack that hit every other hospital in the region." I nodded. "We protect 70% of Fortune 500 companies now, along with numerous government agencies and healthcare systems." "But you never said anything," my mother whispered, her expression a complex mixture of confusion, hurt, and something that might have been pride. "You never asked," I replied gently. "You asked if I had benefits and retirement plans." "I do." My father had gone very still, the way he did when processing unexpected surgical complications. "How long has this been happening?" he asked finally. "I founded the company 8 years ago with my Stanford classmate Sophia. We took it public 3 weeks ago." 8 years, he repeated. "All those Christmases, all those conversations about your brother's achievements." "While I was building a company valued at nearly $40 billion, I finished for him." "Yes." The silence that followed was deafening. Decades of family dynamics were being reevaluated in real-time, assumptions crumbling visibly on faces around the table. My father set down his napkin and straightened in his chair, slipping into the authoritative posture he had perfected over decades. "Crystal, clearly there has been a misunderstanding. Your mother and I always believed in your potential, but you were so independent, so determined to make your own way." The revisionist history was beginning already. I had anticipated this. "What your father means," my mother interjected, "is that we are very proud of you, dear. So proud. We simply did not understand what you were building." Thomas, ever the financial mind, had recovered his composure and was recalculating his approach. "Sis, this is incredible. We should talk about some family investment opportunities I have been considering. With your business acumen and my financial connections, we could create something magnificent together." James nodded eagerly. "The medical technology space is exploding right now. With your software background and my clinical expertise, we could revolutionize healthcare." My father cleared his throat. "About what I said earlier regarding the inheritance. That was merely a preliminary thought, not a final decision. Obviously, your remarkable success demonstrates your responsibility. We will have the documents revised immediately." One by one, they were pivoting from dismissal to opportunism so seamlessly it was almost impressive. The inheritance that minutes ago I did not deserve was suddenly being offered again. The brothers who had condescended to me for decades were now proposing partnerships. The father who had never believed in me was rewriting history to claim he had always seen my potential. Even as success came, I maintained this separation. Our PR team handled media relations, our growing executive team represented the company at industry events, and I focused on product development and strategy. When interviews were unavoidable, I kept them technical and brief, avoiding personal angles that might connect back to my family. "Thank you for dinner, Mother. It was delicious as always." "You are not leaving?" she asked, alarmed. "I have an early flight tomorrow," I replied. "But we have so much to discuss," my father insisted, rising as well. "So much to catch up on. Your company, your future plans. The family has investments that could benefit from your insight." 8 years, I said quietly. "For 8 years I called and visited." For 8 years, I listened to detailed accounts of James and Thomas' successes while my work was dismissed as a hobby. For 8 years, I was the disappointment, the daughter who could not quite measure up. That is not fair, Thomas protested weakly. It is entirely fair, I countered. 5 minutes ago, before Aaron showed you that article, you were comfortable with me being cut out of the family inheritance because I had not proven my worth. Because my choices did not align with your vision of success. My father's expression hardened slightly. You cannot blame us for not recognizing the significance of your work when you deliberately kept us in the dark. I did not keep you in the dark. I told you I had founded a cybersecurity company. I told you we were growing. I told you I was doing well. You chose not to inquire further because technology was not medicine or finance, so it could not possibly be important. Crystal, my mother began, her voice pleading. I do not need your inheritance, I continued calmly. I do not need family investment opportunities or business partnerships. What I needed was your belief in me, your interest in my work, your recognition of my capabilities. Not after learning I am a billionaire, but before, when I was just your daughter trying to build something meaningful. The room had gone completely silent again. Even the children were watching wide-eyed, sensing the seismic shift occurring in the family hierarchy. I did not keep my success secret to hurt you, or to create some dramatic reveal, I explained, softening my tone slightly. I kept it separate because I needed to build something that was entirely mine, not subject to the Morgan family assessment of its value. I gathered my purse and coat. I love you all, and I always will, but I will not pretend that my worth began when Forbes published that list. I am the same person I was yesterday, doing the same work I have been passionate about for years. The only thing that has changed is your perception. My father stepped forward, his expression, a complex mixture of emotions I had rarely seen on his carefully controlled face. Crystal, please. Let us talk about this privately. We can talk next time I visit, I replied. I think we all need time to adjust to this new reality. As I moved toward the door, my mother caught my arm gently. I always knew you were extraordinary, she whispered. In my own quiet way, I followed everything. I have a folder of every article that ever mentioned your company, even when your name was not included. The admission surprised me. You never said anything. Your father, she began, then stopped herself. No, that is not fair. I made my own choices too. I should have supported you more openly. I hugged her briefly. We can talk more soon, I promise. As I walked through the grand foyer toward the front door, I heard quick footsteps behind me. Aaron, phone still in hand, caught up with me by the coat rack. Aunt Crystal, is it true you invented that security thing that stopped the hospital hackers? Dad said it saved thousands of patient records. I nodded, smiling genuinely for the first time that evening. My team and I built it together, yes. That is so cool, he said, eyes wide with authentic admiration. I am learning to code too. Could I maybe email you sometime, ask some questions? Anytime, I replied, writing my personal email on a slip of paper from my purse. I always answer questions from fellow coders. Outside, the snow was falling gently, adding fresh powder to the already white landscape. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the crisp winter air, feeling lighter than I had in years. A car pulled up at the end of the driveway, headlights illuminating the falling snow. As I approached, the passenger window rolled down, revealing Heather's familiar face. Need a getaway driver? She asked, with a knowing smile. How did you know? I laughed, opening the door and sliding into the warm interior. Please, I have known you for 15 years. I calculated precisely how long that dinner would last before imploding. She put the car in drive. Hotel or airport? Hotel for tonight. I am not quite ready to leave New Hampshire yet. As we pulled away from the Morgan family estate, I glanced back at the illuminated windows, the silhouettes of my family still visible in the dining room. For the first time, I was leaving on my own terms, neither slinking away in defeat, nor running from rejection, but simply choosing my own path forward. So Heather asked, after a few minutes of comfortable silence, how did it feel? I considered the question carefully. Complicated. Satisfying in some ways, sad in others. Like the end of something, but also a beginning. She nodded. Family reckonings usually are. The strangest part, I admitted, is that I do not feel as vindicated as I thought I would. Their sudden interest in me now feels almost as hollow as their dismissal before. Because neither is about who you actually are, Heather observed wisely. Both reactions are about their perception of your value to them. As the estate disappeared from view behind us, I felt the complex knot of emotions beginning to unravel. Not resolution exactly, but something close to peace. "What happens next?" Heather asked as we approached the hotel. "I am not entirely sure," I replied honestly. "But for the first time in my life, I feel like the relationship with my family will be on my terms, not theirs." The snow continued to fall, covering the past and creating a clean slate for whatever would come next. 3 weeks after the Christmas dinner revelation, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Manhattan penthouse, watching snow swirl between skyscrapers. The view could not have been more different from my childhood home in New Hampshire, yet the weather created a strange connection between past and present, as if the same snowflakes might be falling in both places. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "At your building. Security says I need approval to come up." I had been expecting this visit. After numerous calls and messages in the weeks following Christmas, I had finally agreed to meet with him in New York, on my territory, not his. A small but significant shift in our dynamic. "Please send him up." I instructed the concierge via the building's app. Minutes later, a knock at the door announced his arrival. Richard Morgan stood in my hallway looking somehow smaller than I remembered. Perhaps it was the absence of his usual setting, the Morgan family estate, where everything reinforced his authority. Here in the home I had created for myself, he was simply a man in his 70s, holding a briefcase and looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Crystal," he greeted me formally. "Thank you for seeing me." "Would you like coffee?" I offered, leading him into the living area with its panoramic views of the city. "Please." As I prepared 2 cups in the open kitchen, I watched him taking in my home, his eyes lingering on the modern art collection, the minimalist furniture, the technology subtly integrated into every surface. Nothing here would remind him of the traditional New England aesthetics he valued. "Your place is very..." He paused, searching for an appropriate word. Different eye suggested handing him a cup. "Impressive," he finished. "Very much your own." We sat across from each other, the coffee table between us, holding more than porcelain mugs. "I brought something to show you," he said after a moment, opening his briefcase and extracting a folder. "Your mother mentioned she had been keeping articles about your company." I did not believe her at first. He handed me the folder. Inside were dozens of printouts, newspaper clippings, and magazine articles about SecureSphere dating back to our earliest mentions in tech publications. Many were highlighted or annotated in my mother's neat handwriting. "She followed your career from the beginning," he said quietly. "She tried to tell me many times that what you were building was significant. I did not listen." I leafed through the collection, a documentary record of my professional journey seen through my mother's eyes. I had no idea she was paying such close attention. "Neither did I," he admitted. "We have not always communicated well in our marriage." The admission of imperfection, however small, was unprecedented from my father. "Crystal," he continued, setting down his coffee cup with surgical precision, "I came here today to apologize. My words at Christmas were indefensible. Not just the inheritance announcement, but years of failing to recognize your potential and achievements." I had imagined this conversation many times over the years, but now that it was happening, I found myself without a scripted response. "The truth is," he continued, "when I remained silent, I did not understand your world. Medicine and finance made sense to me. Technology seemed intangible, foreign. Rather than admit my ignorance, I dismissed its importance. That does not explain why you always supported James and Thomas unconditionally while questioning every choice I made," I pointed out. He nodded slowly. "No, it does not. That reflects something deeper. Something I am not proud to acknowledge. I never learned how to be a father to a daughter with ambitions beyond what I understood for women of my generation." The admission hung between us incomplete, but more honest than anything he had ever shared with me. "I am not asking for your forgiveness today," he said after a long pause. "I have not earned that yet. I am asking for an opportunity to understand the woman and the business leader you have become, without the prejudices that blinded me before. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my father not as the infallible patriarch of the Morgan family, but as a flawed man confronting his mistakes. It did not erase decades of hurt, but it created an opening where none had existed before. I would like that, I replied simply. We talked for 3 hours that afternoon. He asked questions about SecureSphere, listening attentively to explanations of concepts he would have dismissed years earlier. I shared stories of building the company, the challenges and triumphs he had never heard. We did not solve everything, but we began the process of knowing each other as adults. As he prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Your brothers would like to see you too when you are ready. They are recalibrating their understanding of their little sister. I smiled slightly. I imagine they are. Tell them I will reach out when I return from our European expansion launch next month. After my father left, I called Sophia and Heather, inviting them to dinner that evening. At an exclusive restaurant overlooking Central Park, we toasted not just our business success, but the journey that had brought us together. To thinking we needed to prove ourselves to others and discovering we were really proving something to ourselves, Sophia offered, raising her glass. I have been thinking about that a lot lately, I admitted. About how much of my drive came from wanting my family's validation, and how little that matters now that I have it. Because you realized you never needed it in the first place, Heather suggested. Exactly. The validation I thought I wanted feels hollow compared to what we built together, what we accomplished on our own terms. Over dinner, I shared my new idea with them, a concept that had been forming since Christmas. I want to create a foundation supporting women in technology, specifically targeting those whose potential is being overlooked or dismissed. The Crystal Morgan Foundation for Underestimated Women, Sophia suggested with a smile. Something like that minus my name, I laughed. A fund to provide not just capital but mentorship, opening doors that remained closed for us until we broke them down ourselves. Within 6 months, the foundation was established with an initial endowment of $200 million. We focused on identifying young women with exceptional talent, but limited resources, particularly those facing familial or cultural resistance to their technological ambitions. My relationship with my family evolved slowly. My mother and I developed a closer bond built on her surprising secret support throughout the years. My brothers and I established a more equal dynamic, though old patterns occasionally resurfaced. My father and I continued our conversations, gradually building a relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who he had expected me to be. The most unexpected development came from my nephew Aaron, who eagerly accepted my offer of mentorship. His genuine interest in coding and cybersecurity provided a bridge between generations of the Morgan family, suggesting that perhaps the legacy my father valued so much would continue, just not in the way he had envisioned. A year after the Christmas dinner revelation, I stood on stage at a technology conference preparing to deliver the keynote address to 5,000 attendees. In the front row sat my parents, my brothers, and Aaron, watching with expressions ranging from pride to lingering amazement. As I began speaking about the future of cybersecurity and the importance of diverse perspectives in technological innovation, I caught my father's eye. He nodded slightly, a gesture containing a lifetime of unspoken complexity, but also finally respect. The journey from being overlooked at the family dinner table to leading a multi-billion-dollar company had been arduous and often lonely. The wounds of decades of dismissal would never completely heal. But standing on that stage, I realized that the true inheritance I had claimed was not measured in dollars, but in self-belief, in the power of persisting when no one except yourself recognizes your potential. Success had not given me the validation I once craved from my family. Instead, it had freed me from needing that validation at all. The most valuable legacy we can create is not what we leave for others, but what we discover within ourselves along the way. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who underestimated you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Share this with someone who might need the reminder that their value does not depend on others' recognition. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most important person who needs to believe in you is yourself.